This is the Everything EV podcast by EV Powered.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Everything EV podcast, the podcast dedicated to everything electric. I'm your host, Charlie Atkinson, and in these episodes we'll be discussing everything to do with electric travel. So whether it be cars, bikes, boats, or even planes, we'll have it covered. We'll also be speaking to people from within the industry to get their views on the EV space, as well as other features such as electric car reviews, electric motorsport coverage, and much, much more along the way. This podcast is available on all streaming platforms, so be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast from to receive every single episode as soon as it's released. And please do go back and check out all our other episodes too. In this episode, I speak with Joe Tighe of electric bus conversion specialists Kleanbus. Inspired by the need to tackle urban air pollution and the environmental impact from diesel buses, Joe set out on a mission to remove as many diesel buses from the streets as possible and to replace them with electric alternatives. Here, Joe talks about the key moment that caused him to embark on this journey, the challenges he's faced along the way, and how important electric buses are for the overall transition to electric vehicles. I suppose the best place to start then for, like I said, if these podcasts are getting to know you pieces, for anyone that might not be aware of Kleanbus and what you guys do, how do you best describe that? What's your sort of best sales pitch for the company?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason we do what we do is because we're very mission driven. We come at this very much from an environmental perspective, and we identified diesel buses as one of the single biggest contributors to local air quality, poor air quality, and environmental impact. So what we did was we set about putting together a set of technologies to remove diesel engines from buses and replace them with clean electric, just because the 97% of buses are diesel. So if you extrapolate that over a timeline of how quickly can we replace them with new buses, it's 30 years plus. Mm-hmm. So the best thing really to do is to incorporate repowering, which is what we do, in with replacing buses with new buses.
Yeah. And when did this whole journey of Kleanbus begin? Well, if we could start with your sort of background to begin with, and then how that led to the sort of inception of Kleanbus and then the journey along so far to where we are today.
Yeah, so my background is finance. I started trading commodities in the 1980s and have been in London since 1993. So I've been a British passport holder for longer than most of the British passport holders, I think. So I've been here a long time. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I just decided that I've had enough of finance and really wanted to sort of commit myself to things that were positive for humanity or for the environment and our planet. So I really kind of stepped away from finance, got involved with a company called Benevolent AI, which is artificial intelligence for drug discovery. And that was an amazing ride and really enjoyed it. A buddy of mine who was the founder of the company, who used to work for me in an early startup of mine. And then I left that to do a biopolymer to replace plastics. And that still exists. And then when we were looking at, how we get involved in the energy side of the business, we looked at sort of, distributed energy generation and storage, really trying to come up with a comprehensive way of attacking the way we currently do things, which is single point of production and a massive grid distribution system, and look at it much more as sort of nodes on a knowledge graph, which every little area has got its own generation and storage, and they interconnect for resilience. And when we looked at that, we looked at commercial models to support that. And very quickly, you come to a couple of big users of energy in a local area, which is it's always data centers and transportation and manufacturing. So we looked into the transportation side, and we thought, oh wow, here's these local transportation and buses that uses a huge amount of energy. And as we looked into it, we realized that 97% of the buses were still diesel. So we said, that's the big problem that needs to be solved. So we turned our sort of financial hat on that and then engineering hat to how do we solve this very efficiently and make it very financially viable for the fleet operators. So that's what we bring to the party, is really kind of how we prefabricate a solution which is financeable to the fleet operator, so it doesn't cost them any money out of pocket.
I just want to go back to when you mentioned when you stepped away from finance, you said you wanted to do something that sort of greatly benefited humanity. Was there a specific turning point, or yeah, what caused that sort of mindset change? I'm interested to see what sort of forced you to go from that side to where you are now.
Yeah, so it coincides with my 6-year-old son. So I had a little boy 6 years ago, almost to the day, and I just decided that, yeah, he's going to have to deal with things that we didn't have to deal with. And so I really thought, okay, not that I'm so egotistical that I think I can change the world, but I think that if everyone tries and everyone does what they can do, that will start to make a difference eventually. So that's really kind of what the turning point was. And I think by far Kleanbus is the most impactful thing that I can do. I can measure every single diesel engine that we take off the road is just under 38,000 liters of diesel not burned in our city centers every year. And that's every single bus. So you start doing the math and you do 1,000 buses. It's an enormous amount of diesel not being burned. And there are 5 million buses in the world operating. So it really is impactful, and it's very tangible, something that we know for every single bus we do, we know there's a real impact.
Yeah. And when you've worked across so many different industries and you've had a career that's as varied as yours, how challenging has the journey of Kleanbus proven to be in comparison to those? Because, I mean, converting any vehicle over from petrol or diesel to electric, I mean, we do a lot with EV conversion specialists, and just doing it with classic cars is challenging enough. So doing it with great big buses has got to be sort of fraught with different obstacles and barriers, surely.
Yeah, it really is sort of a journey, as you say. We started with an engineering company that threw their hand at this, and they underestimated it. So they actually ended up going bust, and we picked up all their assets and some of their staff. And we really kind of attacked the software side of the problem early on, and then the physical, the packaging of the equipment later in the stage. But it's not easy. It's something that you really need to have a number of great experts. We've been very fortunate along the way. We picked up as our chairman the ex-president of IMECE, Terry Spall. And so we've kind of been very lucky all the way along to pick up really good people. And we've got what we think is a really good system. The technology in our space is moving very quickly. So we opted not to try and design batteries or design motors, which is a really difficult thing to do. And it's a super competitive space that's moving very quickly. So even if you do develop something, it's very hard to get that to market and scale it. So we work with other suppliers to provide the motors and power electronics and batteries. And we, even within that, when you look at what we do for buses, we're very much solution oriented because we're not selling equipment. So we don't really care if somebody wants a lot of energy storage or just a little bit of energy storage, to make sure that they optimize the bus for its duty cycle. And so we work together with charge point providers and the fleet operator and the local council and the grid to say, okay, how do we come up with a system which enables this bus to run with as little energy storage as possible and be as efficient as possible? If you put 10 300 kilogram batteries on a bus, well, you've got 3 tons of battery that you're carrying around for 150 miles a day, every single day across all of your buses. And that amount of energy is enormous. So we really look at it from the other perspective. We say, okay, what's the least amount of energy we can put on this bus and not have any range anxiety, never drop below a state of charge of 50%. And within that, the argument comes to opportunity charging and how do we build the infrastructures to support that.
Yeah. And what's the state of play for you guys at the minute? How sort of far along are you on your journey? Do you have any buses out on the roads at the moment? Yeah. Where do you sit at the moment?
So we're still pretty early on. We've got a working demo bus. We're in talks with a number of operators to do pilot schemes for them. Our system is very different than what is currently being done. We build a subframe, which is designed for each make and model of bus. And then we can pre-assemble the entire drivetrain and pre-test it. So we're able to transfer a bus from being diesel to electric inside of a week to 2 weeks. And that is very different from what is currently happening in the market.
Yeah. And so just going back to what you said earlier about how you said it was your 6-year-old son that inspired you to go on this, and when you sort of do the maths of just taking a diesel bus off the roads and how much pollution that saves, it seems like a bit of an obvious answer, but just how important is what you guys are doing to that sort of overall transition to electric vehicles? Because it's all well and good having new electric vehicles coming out from Ford, Mercedes, and all this, but there's a whole other side to mobility and transportation that is where it seems a lot further behind than everyday transport. So buses and other forms of transport like that, HGVs and lorries are the next step, really, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, buses are a really good example of something that is great to be repowered. They're very expensive to buy brand new. And they also have the advantage of not being point to point. They do circles in neighborhoods. So if you really want to have an impact in your local area, buses are a great one to start with. They're heavy diesel vehicles that produce an enormous percentage of the greenhouse gases and particulate matter in a town. So we kind of focused on buses for that reason, because you really could see the impact. We could repower 3 to 5 buses for the same price as a new bus. Wow. So all of a sudden, we really are the champion of the operators. We're trying to figure out what is the most financially viable, technically sound, and expedient way of transferring their buses from diesel to electric. And that's a hard problem to solve. There's technical problems there. There's financing, and so we work together with other ecosystem players, the guys who charge point providers, impact investors, to come up with financial solutions that make it easier for the fleet operators and government. The governments, they're just getting their head around how to help the industry do this. So that's been a conversation that the guys at Zemo have been incredibly instrumental in helping. And just working together with the ecosystem to try and come up with the best solutions. It's really what we do.
Yeah, just off the back of that, you've had conversations with different people, and the government are trying to wrap their head around this. Have you had any conversations with government specifically? Have you had any support at all? What support have you had along the way?
Yeah, so we've spoken to DFT and Transport Scotland. I was at an afternoon lunch at Lord's on Tuesday that was hosted by Zemo, and they're very open to the conversation. But to deeply understand the issue from the grid all the way back to the wheels of the vehicles, it's complex. So they need a lot of obviously they're very bright people, but they can't be bright and be deeply knowledgeable about everything. So, it's the difference between looking at a diesel vehicle and saying, okay, I have to replicate a diesel vehicle. It has 350 miles of range, so I've got to figure out how to carry enough battery to do 350 miles. When actually, that's not the argument. Particularly with buses, because they're just doing circles, you want to figure out how to get the energy to that vehicle as cheaply and effectively as possible. And that's where opportunity charging comes in, and that's where sort of government funding and support from the government for the local operators really is critical, because the operators can't afford to build infrastructure. On top of the infrastructure, they're meant to be building into their own depots and replacing their whole fleet. It's untenable.
Yeah, I think the word you mentioned, which sort of struck a chord for me, was the understanding side of it. I mean, take it away from government for a minute, but just the sort of average person just on the street, they're probably now beginning to wrap their heads around electric cars, but they probably can't understand or can't fathom how you can have an electric bus, something so big that is run off electric power. But it does make sense, doesn't it? Considering how much range that you can pack into these things and how they are ideal because you can charge them overnight. So it does make sense. So there's I suppose for your part, there's a big element of this of trying to make people understand and explaining to people that buses and lorries can be electric, and it's just how you do it, like you said, in that cost efficient way.
Yeah, and Wayne Gretzky said it right. You have to skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it was. And that's what we try to teach people, is that the fastest moving elements of our puzzle are charging and chargeability of batteries. So the charge technology is really moving quickly. It's gone from 11 kilowatts to 450, 500 kilowatt systems, and wireless charging, pantograph charging, all different types of chargeability in the battery management system, and the way the cells are designed and the way that the batteries are monitored. So the ability to charge faster is going to get better and better. And so instead of stopping for an hour to have lunch and a cup of coffee while your car or bus or truck recharges, you literally will be able to stop for a minute, 2 minutes, and get to 80% state of charge. And there's a lot of different technologies coming to the market that are, there's still some time away, but that's really going to be the paradigm shift that people notice.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I've not specifically to Kleanbus, but I wanted to get your thoughts on the sort of future of this industry, really, because I mean, this past year I've been to loads of different exhibitions and conferences where we're seeing megawatt charging and things like this. So what for you, what would you say is a realistic timescale for having if we just pluck London out of the air as an example, what would you say is a realistic timescale to have a fully electric fleet of buses operating in a major city centre like that? I know it's getting your people out a little bit there, but
well, I mean, if you look at London, there's 8,500 buses in London alone. So to buy all new buses would be impossible. To replace them, to repower them and buy new buses is really kind of the right mix. I would hope that we could achieve that in 3, 4, or 5 years. But again, that takes kind of the best wind, the best sort of circumstances to get that done. And if you look at across the world, everyone's trying to do this at the same time. So the supply chains are going to get more and more taxed. So I think that's going to be the sort of the really difficult one, where unless some new battery technologies come to the fore that aren't completely reliant on lithium and rare earths, then that's good. That'll be the sticking point where you get those bottlenecks and supply chain issues.
Yeah, and is Kleanbus predominantly based and focused on the UK market? I know you mentioned that there's other supply chains in other markets globally. Is that something of interest to you guys? Are you looking to venture into Europe or over to the States or other markets like that?
Yeah, I mean, we literally get contacted every day from different jurisdictions, particularly the US, but also Southeast Asia, Europe a little bit, not quite so much, quite obviously the UK. And our model is very much to try and procure power electronics, motors, and batteries locally. We can design the system locally, and then we have we bring our process to a local group, and then we create a local manufacturing facility or assembly facility, basically. So that's the intention of the business, and that's the only way to scale it and really have an impact on a global scale, is to be able to mushroom the business in very simple assembly units and keep all of the software and technical bits in sort of a tightly held group.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask as well, because obviously we're coming towards the back end of this year now. So I always like to end these podcasts by getting people to do their sort of short-term future of the business and then the long-term vision. So as we are about to turn the corner into 2023 now, what's your to-do list for 2023? What's that short-term goal and your plans for next year? But also, if you look sort of 3, 4, 5 years down the line? What's that long-term vision of the company, and what do you hope to achieve by, as we sort of approach the end of the decade, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, the short-term vision is just to continue to refine our technology and make it more and more applicable, develop more and more solutions for different makes and models of buses to make that pretty much plug and play as far as is possible. Work together with charge point providers to make sure that the ability to create an efficient, holistic solution rather than just selling people equipment. Of course, we could pack 10 massive batteries in a bus. It's not what you should do for a legacy bus. So, those vehicles were designed to be diesel vehicles, not electric. So you have to try and sculpt your solution in line with the engineering that the original bus designers were working to. And so I think that's really for us in the next year. We're totally focused on buses in the next few years. In the medium term, we're absolutely focused on removing as many heavy diesel systems as we can. So moving on to HGVs, moving on to other types of heavy vehicles with large residual values that you can finance. So that's how we bring our solution to the market without having to the operators fork over enormous amounts of money to do this transition. They can actually finance it and lease it as if they were buying a new vehicle.
That's all for this episode. Many thanks for listening, and if you liked it, then please do check out all our other episodes and be sure to subscribe to wherever you get your podcast from to make sure you get every single episode as soon as it's released. For daily news coverage, features and much more, you can also head over to evpowered.co.uk. Thanks once again for listening, and we'll see you on the very next episode of the Everything EV podcast.